right. You can hear me probably, right? So I'm going to talk to you about how the arrival of international streaming platforms, most prominently the Netflix, have changed the television scape in Turkey. So in 2016, Netflix have decided to internationalize, have decided to go overseas. So one of the countries that they have expanded into was Turkey. So, Turkish TV series have already received substantial popularity, especially in the Middle East, due to its dramas. But especially in the last decades, because of the growing political authoritarianism, the media content has been largely shaped by governmental agendas. So even though majority of the media in Turkey is privately owned, the content there has been substantial pressure on private media to create certain content and not others. But the arrival of international streaming platforms have enlarged the playing field, which means that it became possible to create the kinds of contents that we can hardly encounter in mainstream broadcast media, which also generated substantial backlash. First it was Netflix, and then came Amazon, Disney Plus, whatever. So I'm not trying to create a diametrical opposition between, I don't want to create a diametrical opposition between mainstream broadcast TV and international streaming platforms. Not everything the international streaming platforms creates necessarily is good, and not everything that comes out of mainstream broadcast media is necessarily awful, but it basically, and it opens a larger playing field. Especially the Netflix have generated substantial debate in Turkey. For instance, because of the content of Netflix programs, governments, especially high-ranking government personalities, have harshly criticized Netflix. Again, because of the growing authoritarianism in the country, there has been a growing interest in historical dramas. These historical dramas basically serve to justify and legitimize contemporary political concerns. For instance, there has been too many of them that it's hard to even count how many there exists. These programs, some of them are produced by privately owned channels, some of them are created by state channel, TRT, but they typically serve to legitimize, ambitious foreign policy objectives of the contemporary Turkish government. So what happens in these dramas oftentimes is that they picture a glorified image of Turkey's imperial past, Ottoman imperial past, and then male characters are at the center stage, and male heroism is often portrayed in a very positive manner, whereas foreigners are depicted in a denigrated manner. So what I'm trying to say here is that, for instance, Netflix, again, is not exactly devoid of such problematic portrayals of the past itself. It also played into patriotic and nationalistic, xenophobic sentiments that exist in Turkey. For instance, they made historical dramas that basically tells a glorified image of the past. But at the same time, they try to portray something different, something that we cannot quite easily encounter in mainstream broadcast media. So today I'm going to briefly focus on one particular case, which is not exclusive, but it just portrays how the arrival of international streaming media kind of challenges contemporary mediascape in portraying things that we don't really encounter in mainstream broadcast media. So I'm going to focus on this TV show called The Gift. So it tells a historical episode from 12,000 years ago. So the central character is a woman, not a man for a difference, but and then it tells a historical episode that based on the facts, but at the same time it just, of course, it is fictionalized, and it includes fantastic elements in it. So the story takes place in 12,000 years ago. The story takes place in modern world, but it connects with 12,000 years ago. There was this place called Göbekli Tepe, which is basically a monument from 12,000 years ago. That is believed to be a religious place, Nobody exactly knows what happened there, but at the time when people were still hunters and gatherers, they built structures that is meant to bring them together, and that is meant to serve a religious purpose. So the reason why I think this show is important and significant is because it does tell us a historical past. It does tell us something about history, about Turkey's history, but it does not glorify imperial grandeur. It does not focus on male heroism and battles and etc. Instead, it does tell us a female-centered story that takes place in pre-imperial age. And in so doing, it creates an alternative understanding of the historical past in which minority identities are positively portrayed, because the central characters in the show are not Turkish really. They are from pre-Turkish past. And another thing that I found interesting about this show is that some banal concepts, which I believe banal concepts like, popular spirituality, if you believe in yourself, you can achieve anything kind of stuff that you may all be familiar with. These such banal concepts can also be utilized to create a counter-hegemonic narrative in the sense that contemporary discourse in Turkey emphasized imperial grandeur, male heroism. Instead, this show emphasizes more like peaceful transition and personal growth. So it is banal, but in the context of political authoritarianism, it allows the TV show to create an alternative understanding of the past. Of course, there are still problems about how this show represents the past. It emphasizes diversity, but at the same time, it does not portray what happened to diverse identities in Turkey. So why they were lost. So it emphasizes diversity, but at the same time, it creates a homogeneous understanding of Turkey's history in the sense that all distinct identities and beliefs have together contribute to a unified understanding of Turkey's history. Instead of focusing on diversities for understanding specific communities, it basically tells us that these diversities have always existed, and they are basically they contribute to Turkey's. They contribute to portray Turkey as more like a marketable object in the global media scale. Turkey possesses these diversities, and it makes it more marketable. But at the same time, we don't quite understand what happened to diversity, why Turkey have lost diversity. What were the governmental policies that were put in place in the past that basically eliminated diverse identities in the country's history? So it deals with topics that are hard to talk about in mainstream media, like diversities and how they were lost. But at the same time, it does not focus diversities to portray them. It does focus diversities just so that it can portray Turkey as a marketable object in the international media scale. Okay. So what I want to say in short is that, of course, there is much to criticize about these international streaming platforms. They are always very good. They operate based on marketable agendas. They make films and TV shows to make money, of course, but especially when they enter into authoritarian context or growingly authoritarian context, they also they open up a place in which mainstream media finds hard to talk. They can talk about topics that mainstream broadcast media finds it hard to talk about. they can provide an alternative understanding of historical past and identities. Okay. Do you guys have any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Identity, so you mean national identity or ethnical identities of people who live in Turkey? Or what is this meant under identity?
Yeah, actually, I mean to say both. There's national identity, of course, which is basically promoted by the government itself, but at the same time, there's varieties of identities. There are different people living in the country. And if you go back to historical episodes, I mean, so many different people have lived in the country. So, I mean, this show, instead of emphasizing a xenophobic narrative that emphasized Turkishness and Islam, it was focusing on all these diverse identities that have historically existed in the country's history. It also emphasized religious and national diversities, which I liked actually, because I thought was beneficial for considering the fact that the country is being ruled by a somewhat authoritarian government that emphasizes homogeneity as opposed to diversity. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is, I understand this is a Turkish production, right?
It's a co-production between Netflix and Turkish.
Okay, so does the drama being streamed on Netflix lend it more prestige compared to dramas aired on local television?
Absolutely, and especially since in the Valley, young people prefer Netflix dramas as more, I would say, more cool. Whereas most dramas that were screened on broadcast TV can be scorned by younger generation of people who live in the cities, even though they are very marketable in the Middle East, in Eastern Europe, and even in South America. Yeah.
Thank you. I would like to ask, what was the reaction of public opinion when we think there is a rising nationalism and a way of understanding of history? And what happened to the soap opera in that?
What happened in the soap opera is that the thing is, what I believe is that it gives Netflix productions a comparative advantage, precisely because it is hard for mainstream broadcast media in contemporary Turkey to deal with dramatic events in the past or such topics as diversity of the historical past. It gives the drama a comparative advantage because there are also people who are prone towards consuming such narratives. There are people who are more interested in learning or in watching a historical drama that takes place in like distant past, like 12,000 years ago. It can give, some people may scorn it, may not like it. In that case, they wouldn't watch it. But the main audience base of the Netflix shows, which are younger city development people, it gives them something that they cannot find in mainstream broadcast media, which is precisely why it actually has received substantial audience ratings. I mean, in the first season was the most watched TV show on Netflix Turkey among all international TV shows. It has received substantial following. But again, these are the people who are looking for diversity in terms of production qualities. Like they're looking for, they're looking for some alternative to what they can find in mainstream media. Mainstream broadcasting is just basically putting forward versions of the same. So Netflix gives them an alternative to it.